back to tax cuts and whether those who are hoping for big ones are going to see that delayed or realized. So it's sort of a Super Bowl of finance section here as we kick off hour two. We got the Daily Caller News Foundation editor, Katie Frates. We've got market watcher, Kaltbaum, and Fox Business Network's Connell McShane. So, Connell, what of that? The idea that everyone's been hoping for, these tax cuts, and they might still be coming. But when I hear the president telling Bill O'Reilly, might and later on this year, right. I don't know. What do you think?
I really enjoyed your football analysis, Neil.
Well, that's the way I roll, buddy. And keep in mind, I was watching Chop for most of the Super Bowl, but go ahead.
Making it even more impressive. Now, I think I go back to some of the conversations we had leading up to the inauguration about what the dynamic in Washington would look like between the new president and the new minority leader. And I still think that's the most important dynamic, Chuck Schumer and President Trump, and that we thought, or many people thought, maybe there's a chance to work together with these two New Yorkers. Maybe there's an incentive for Schumer to cut some deals. And now if you look at the first couple of weeks of the Trump presidency, for one reason or another and all the things that have come in, it looks less and less likely that that's going to happen. So whether it's tax reform, even if it's regulatory reform, and even if it's infrastructure spending, those things look less likely to happen in the near term. And I think a lot of that has to do with it's just the same old polarized Washington.
You know, Katie, what I worry about, though, is a lot of people say, well, Ronald Reagan's tax cuts didn't start overnight back in 1981 when he took over. And they're right about that. And they were layered and over the course of years. But even in that interim, Republicans ended up losing 26 seats. And the fight was a lot tougher after that. Now, he rebounded. I take nothing away from that. But I don't know if Republicans are in that kind of position this go-round. What do you think?
Right, and I think one of the things, if you have the retroactive tax cuts and you have the deregulation, that could jumpstart this economy. It could get ahead of any problems that Democrats could latch onto as talking points in 2018 or 2020. And on top of that, I think if he gets ahead of these tax cuts and he does something that helps businesses and helps the middle class, blue-collar Democrats who turned away from Hillary Clinton in the election in Michigan, in Wisconsin, that went to Trump, maybe went red for the first time in years, could solidify with him. That could be another indication to them that, hey, maybe I should stick with the Republican Party. Maybe I should move over. And I think he should really take that as an opportunity to bring more people into his base.
You know, Gary, it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback, but in the case of the Reagan tax cuts, in a way we can, because they were phased in over years, and they certainly did deliver the bang for the buck. No one doubts that, but it was in a measured way so that, what looked like a certain one-term presidency for him quickly turned around, but it wasn't for years later. So I'm wondering if Republicans are risking ceding a lot of seats in the House, maybe even giving up the House if we delay the oomph we're going to get from tax cuts.
All I can tell you is Donald Trump was driving to the hoop on tax cuts, and it seems to me they're backing away, and the longer they take, the tougher it's going to be. Just remember, Neil, back then, we didn't have massive debt and deficits. We didn't have massive regulations. We are now $20 trillion in debt, and we have government spending this year that's $4.1 trillion, up from 3.8 last year, and just go back 2 presidents ago, 1.8. So all this money's coming out of the economy, and that's why the economy can't get going sooner rather than later. And my big worry is this. There was some supply-siders that was supposed to be advisors to Trump. They're nowhere near the White House at this point in time, and I'm just thinking they're backing away, and this is going to take some time.
You know, I've heard that too, Connell, that those who dominate the economic scene in this administration are not supply-siders. I'm not saying they're Keynesians. They're not big into this idea that we need a big, we don't need a big tax cut. What are you hearing?
Yeah, Gary Cohn as opposed to, say, Larry Kudlow or Steve Moore or somebody like that. Yeah, I mean, before Gary Cohn took this position, a lot of people didn't know a lot about his politics at Goldman Sachs other than to speculate that he was maybe more on the left than on the right, and now he ends up in this administration with obviously a big, big say. I think the story going back to Friday when we were talking about regulatory reform on Wall Street and rolling back some of those regulations seemed to have his fingerprints on it, so that made a lot of sense. On taxes, I'm not so sure, but I think a lot of it comes back to the focus. I mean, we talk sometimes about, hey, why is it such a big deal that the administration or the president gets off on some other topic, be it immigration or whatever the topic of the day may be. But again, to go back to the earlier point, it it all contributes to this polarized nature of trying to get things done with the other side, and then you have fewer Democrats who are willing to work with Republicans just because, you know, they can't go home and sell it that they're going to work with this president because of what he may have said on a different subject. It makes tax reform, I think, less likely to get done.
Yeah,
because
and they latch on to that.
Yeah.
Katie, you know, the argument I heard from one Republican senator at the top of the last hour was, look, Neil, we get a lot of bang for the buck from regulatory relief. That stimulates the economy. I have no doubt maybe addressing some of the onerous burdens in Dodd-Frank does that, and the health care law does that. But nothing equals the impact of a tax cut. To me, that's a bias. But what do you make of that? A prominent Republican senator saying, you know, all things being equal, it's nice to get regulatory relief, as if that will do the job. I don't know about that.
Right, I agree. And, you know, he's done a lot of good gestures, of course, carrier, look at, you, as you said, Dodd-Frank, the fiduciary rule. But you need something more concrete than that. I think people need something that they can sink their teeth into, something that they can look at and actually has ideals and concepts and things that he wants to do. But at the same time, Congress can get the ball rolling on this as well. I mean, look at the GOP retreat. They have the border adjustment tax that people like Representative Roscom are touting. Trump's been very wishy-washy on that.
Right.
McConnell's been wishy-washy on it. But I think it is a much better plan, personally, than the 20% import tariff. And, I mean, they're putting out suggestions. And I think if Trump's not going to get going on it, Congress certainly can.
That's a very good point. You know, Gary, let me, hypothetical though it may be, if it looks like this is going to be a late year development and maybe not take effect until next year, how will the market react to that?
Well, I'm a big believer that the markets are working off of all the promises of Donald Trump. It is by no accident that November 9th, the market lifted off, led by the financials because of the regulatory relief, but also because of the promise of corporate tax cuts. It is my expectation that markets are going to know likey if they take their time on doing this. And let me be clear.
Did you just say no likey? Is that...
Regulations are fine. But tax relief is the only way to force government to get smaller. We cannot continue the trajectory of this, the growth of government. It is sucking the air out of the real economy, and that's why you're seeing 2% growth at best for the last few years. And I can guarantee if they don't do anything, business owners who are prepared and the market who has been expected going to go the wrong way.
Yeah. How likely is that, Connell? I mean, when you talk to people, do they kind of think, all right, it's coming, it's just not coming soon? So it's not as if, you know, the president is denied, it's delayed.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is still the debate over not of the when, not the if. But I mean, that could change too. I mean, the assumption seems to be now that we're at best, when we're especially on the topic of tax reform, that we're at best talking about late this year. Even the president himself, in his interview with Bill O'Reilly, that seemed to be what he was indicating when he was answering that part of the question. So,
indeed,
you know, that means more likely you're rolling into early next year. But that's the when. But if the if starts to become a serious question, then maybe, to Gary's point, you have more problems in the markets. I don't know.
Then no likey, to Gary's
no likey,
point.
exactly right.
No likey.
Guys, thank you all very, very much.